Hi there. I'm so glad you're here with us today. I'm here today with my good friend, Tony Weedor. And Tony, I think I would call you my African father. So I'm
Yes.
really happy to have you here and have a discussion today. So Tony and I met through an organization called Advancing Native Missions where we both worked. I still work for a while. And I've been able to visit Tony's home country of Liberia 3 times. And so I have a special place in my heart for the people of Liberia and for Tony and his wife, Beth. So I'm really thrilled to have him here. Tony, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
First of all, I'm so glad you admitted on tape that I'm your African father for two men, Millie and Johnson Asare. I hope he will be watching this.
My consultant.
Anyway, yes, I'm Tony Weedor. Like Amber said, I used to work for A&M, but now we have transitioned to Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. I work in the mission department here. I think we are the 4th or 5th largest church in the nation. And I've been really busy. Like I was telling you before you started recording, Amber, the transition has really been excellent. And I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, so Tony, in my book that just came out, Finding Simplicity, it wrestles with the idea that joy is possible in every situation based on the book of James that says we can consider all things joy, even the various trials that we face. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because I know that you have wrestled through that. And I just want to mention before we start, Tony recently published a book and it's called The Reason for Tears. And in it, you have this quote from John Stott, which says, "The truth is that there are such things as Christian tears, and too few of us ever weep them." And I was just wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about that and choosing joy and what that looks like. How does it mix together?
Well, that's a good question, Amber. First of all, thank you. And thank you for writing the book. It's not easy writing. And I'm glad that it's out there. And I challenge anyone listening to us today, I hope they get a copy of your book. It is not easy to be joyful. Like, especially now, let me forget about my past story, but right now, you see what's going on. I was just telling someone yesterday, Amber, I think 13,000 Americans, my fellow Americans, die yesterday. Mm-hmm. You know, just like that. How can you be joyful in that? And then you look at Christians, and just ordinary people in China, in Japan, in Italy, and in Germany, in France, in all these places, you see everything is crumbling. But then when I use the word crumbling, everything is falling apart. I see the British Prime Minister in hospital. I start thinking about power. Everything that I was leaning on is like God have taken away the crutches. Mm-hmm. So I cannot, there's nothing for me to lean on that I trust, that I know, that I understand. He has taken it away from me and he's telling me, look at me. And it is in that I know that he has the future. He knows the future. He holds my hands. And so it is in that I'm comforted. And in that comfort, I rejoice, knowing that God is still in charge. I'm not. It is bleak today, but he's still there. And he's not responsible for the evil that is going on in the world. I have to make that distinction. So it is in that when everything that could bring me comfort is gone, yet I'm still joyful because the joy is in God, who made me to be joyful, who made me to suffer, who made me to understand that he is in charge, understand my sovereign will. I mean, you have a father. I know your parents very well. Mm-hmm. I mean, when they discipline you, it was not joyful. And it was not joyful for them. It was not joyful for you. Mm-hmm. But in it, when you're looking back on it now, you say, wow, I'm glad my parents did what they did. Look what's happening to me today, how it has prepared me. Reflecting on that, you are joyful.
Yeah, it's a perspective, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the things you share in your book about how you took a journey and you shed tears and how God used that to transform you?
Well, the thing is, first of all, tears, everyone, they say tears bring about tears. I mean, if two of us were crying right now and shared a video, people who don't even know us, just watching us crying,
Yep.
they will start crying. And you watch movies, you walk away. This is why sometimes I don't like watching movie with my wife, because she's crying all the time. So tears bring about tears. And Jesus himself, the God of the universe, who knew that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, yet he cried with the sisters, sympathized, because he knew that he would raise him, but yet he cried. During the Liberian Civil War, it was really like the question you asked in the beginning: how can you be joyful? As we walked, we saw young men, and at times even young women, killing people. I mean, talk about evil. We have experienced almost every kind of evil in Liberia. And in that, as I was crying to God, at first selfishly, God, if you are there, why this evil? If you are in control, why the pandemic? I know some people are asking that question now. And it was in those tears of sorrow, of regret, at times, God turned those tears around, and it became a tears of joy, understanding what his son Jesus Christ went through when he himself cried on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?
I think sometimes Christians have this idea that they have to be strong and they can't show emotion or tell God how they really feel. What would you say to that?
In fact, especially Liberians or Africans as a whole, African men, oh, you're not supposed to cry. Men don't cry. No, it's not. I sent you a list of 10 things yesterday that I'm wrestling with. You cannot be and running from and towards God at the same time. If I'm sorrowful, I let God know. I mean, as children, just take example, we as children, and we raising children, your parents, when you ran to your father crying, he opened up his arms. He didn't care, and he just hugged you. And this is what I have learned with tears, that if it is burning in me, the best expression is I just cry to God, literally cry, Lord, I have met my end. Please come and help me. And many in Israel, tonight, the Passover will be starting. But God told Moses, I have heard the cries of the Israelites. So he listens. We worship a talking God. He speaks, he listens when we talk. And so crying is something now I never used to do before, but now I do a lot of it.
So you mentioned a couple times how God is like an earthly father who loves. And I personally have a great father, but I know that's not true for everybody. And you share in the story, or in the book, your story about your father. And I'm wondering, like, how do you put God in the proper light instead of casting who your father was onto him?
First of all, that's a very good question. And then second, in Islam, you can even call God your father. You are a slave and he's a master. So when you become Christian out of Islam, I mean, to even say father, but the more I got to understand the Bible, understand the characteristic of God the Father, I look at my father now as a sinner, just like me, that needed salvation. Because if my father had been a Christian, it was going to be different. And now if you interview my children today, it's quite different. Because the love of my Father from heaven, I'm pouring that on my own kids. Oh, no, you can't do that. Why? Because she's your sister. No, you can't do that. Why? Because he's your brother. But then I take that same relationship and bring it in Liberia, in Africa. Why? Tribalism is a huge problem. Even in America, race issue is a huge problem. But this is where God breaks down the middle wall no white, no black, no yellow. He brings us together, and he's our Father. You are my daughter. Imagine that. You are my daughter. I'm your African father. Why? Your parents never knew me way back, but I'm so close. I'm close to your parents, then I'm close to some of my fellow Liberians I grew up with. Why? Because your parents and I have the same Father.
That's a beautiful picture of like how if our relationship with God is right, it transforms the way we look at everybody else.
Everybody else. And you went to Liberia, you sat on the floor. I mean, I still have a picture of you sitting on the floor, sorting books, putting up a library for children you don't know. At that time, you have not even met. And you have not met their parents, and some of their parents you have never met, you don't even know, but yet you've been to Liberia 3 different times. Why? Not because you just love the beauty of the country, but because there are Christians there who have the same Father as you, and there are people there who don't know your Father, and you want to introduce them to your Father and my Father.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of Liberia, the reason I went to Liberia is because of your wife and you and your passion and your story. There's not very many people who come out of a situation like you all came out of and have the opportunity to be completely free of that walk back in.
Yeah.
So what compelled you and Beth to go back to Liberia, and what compels you to keep going back and investing in that country?
Well, like the topic you brought out about the Father's love. Amber, there's a guy who was in a refugee camp. His name is Larry T.G. He was a dentist. He's now retired in Maryland here in the United States. And he came into this refugee camp and listened to me preach. And after preaching, walked to Beth. He said, "Hey, Beth, I'm going to help Tony. He's a very good teacher, but he needs a little bit of training." This guy did everything for us, got us out of the refugee camp, brought us to Denver Seminary, studied. We went to Ethiopia as a missionary, came back, started teaching at Denver Seminary. Well, I'm saying all of this to say that we did not know who he was. And I said, "Well, how do I pay you back?" He said, "I don't need anything from you. Whatever you have learned, make sure you help your people." So this is why we keep going back. That if this man could invest in us, and look what God have done through us, what if we invest in these young girls? What will they do for Liberia in the next generation? Even in Africa. And some of these girls could be a UN secretary, president of Liberia, or anything, or pastor, or preacher, whatever God will make them. I just want to be a simple bridge, like a simple faith, a simple bridge for them to help them see who God is.
One thing I really admire about you, and I've learned from you, is you're a very present person in the conversation that you're having, and you notice people. And I think that comes out of what you're talking about, the experience you've had with God's love, and then God uses that love to overflow through you. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is to love the person, the individual? Because sometimes we think in big concepts, like I need to change the world, I need to do this, but how does it impact like one little girl in Liberia, one person?
Well, maybe I've forgotten, but no, I don't know if you remember, your dad helped us with 2 continents. We shipped 2 continents at continents. I don't know what year it was. Anyway, 2015 or 2016, like that. But you were there last year, and I goes to the supermarket in Monrovia, where it's busy. But then I see this girl in a wheelchair sitting there. All the tires are gone. It's old, nothing. And I walk up to her. I said, "How much for a wheelchair here?" She said, "Oh, right. It used to be $250, but it's now $500. And there's no way I can get it." Beautiful, 22 years old. She stopped walking when she was 4 years old. She had never walked after, the accident. And so it just, I noticed her, came back to you. I said, "Amber, we have to give her a wheelchair." And guess what? You didn't have to preach. I didn't have to preach. But that girl today, she's reading her Bible. I'm hearing that. I mean, she's asking anyone that knows me, when is he coming back? We did nothing but to meet her need, to be like Jesus, to be the hands and feet of Jesus. Jesus would never come down physically to help someone, but he will use you, use me, use the book you wrote to touch someone, to transform someone else's life.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes we make it too complicated, don't we?
We do. We do. Yeah.
Sometimes it's just doing the thing that's right in front of us. So, Tony, go ahead.
Well, I just give a quick example. We just came here. We've been here 4 or 5 months now. There are 2,000 Liberians living in the state. So I met 3. And those 3 families I met, I started asking them about the Liberians, and they started telling me about the Liberians. And so during this crisis, I went to the church and talked to the church. Last week, I delivered 143 boxes of food, including chickens, hand sanitizers. And the one question these Liberians, majority that don't go to church, why are you doing this? Who are you? Why are you a Liberian? Yes, I am. But why are you doing? It's like we Liberians, we don't get along here. But you just came. You don't even know who we are. You see, these people now, I can go and sit with them and share the gospel because they have seen the gospel. Now I can share with them.
Do you have advice for people who might say, I want to make an impact in the world. I want to do something for God, but I don't know how. I don't know where to get started. I don't know if I'm hearing from God right.
Well, and I still ask that question. What about the neighbor? What about that person, that elderly woman or man that cannot leave the neighborhood now, that cannot go to the grocery store? Bev and I have been doing that here. We just walk up to the door. You know what? We bought some things, but we have more than 4. Can you have 2? The next thing, who are you? Where you come from? It just little things that people will not even notice. I always like quoting this, how to call him, Martin Lloyd Jones. It is one thing to love preaching, but do you love the people you're preaching to? You see, the gospel has to be real. We have to live it. People have to see it before they read it. And we are Jesus's hands and feet and mouth and eyes. We have to be out there looking for people. And so start with those who are the closest to you. Then you can look at the rest of the world. But those who are the closest to you, start with one person, maybe a little girl that cannot go to school now, that homeschooling, that you can just knock the door and tell the mom, well, I'm clean. I can look after the kids. You just go walk around and come back. Just give a mother a break, or call someone on the phone, or a family member that have not talked to you many, many years. Call them and say, I love you, and I want to be in your life. There's so much. I mean, this is the greatest opportunities for the church. We cannot go to the movies. We don't have our basketball games. We don't have tennis. There's nothing, everything that we used to hold on to for entertainment, gone. There are people who are just dreading it. There are wives who have been abused during this time. There are foster children I'm hearing that are really finding it difficult. Where is the church? This is the time we as Christians need to be visible.
That's a good challenge.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, is there anything else you want to share with the people listening about Liberia, love, simplicity, all the things we've been talking about?
Yeah. First of all, get her book. And then after, pray for Liberia and pray for Africa. Because imagine, Amber, if America can be struggling with what's going on with the coronavirus here. You've been to Liberia, no electricity, there's no running water. They tell you to keep washing your hand. You remember the one thing when we did a medical clinic, they kept, oh, you are dehydrated, you need to drink. People don't drink because there's no water. So just pray for the African continent as a whole. And then 2, as a Christian, if you cannot get to church, if you cannot go to the building, still be the church where you are.
Thank you. Thank you for taking time to talk with me.
Always, Amber.
And for those of you, make sure you get a copy of Tony's book, The Reason for Tears. It goes through his journey of walking through life from a child, through being a refugee, to how he got to the United States and went back to Liberia. So it's very fascinating read. So I encourage you to get that. Thanks for joining me for this conversation.